The store that never saw him the sun was soft that morning in Chennai. It stretched across the narrow lanes like a blanket, touching rusted railings and sleepy rooftops. Inside a small two-room apartment, Sundar Pichai sat at the wooden dining table, the same one he had studied on as a boy. Across from him sat his father, Ragunatha Pichai, slowly stirring a cup of tea, his hands weathered from decades of hard work in the electrical industry. They were home for the first time in years. Sundar had flown in from California, where the pace of life moved faster than he could breathe sometimes. But here, in this old house filled with familiar sounds, the creak of the fan, the distant call of the fruit seller, he felt time slow down. His father looked smaller somehow, but his eyes still held the same light. There was something he wanted to say. Sundar could feel it. After a long pause, his father looked up. "I went to the new luxury mall last week," he said, almost casually. Sundar blinked. His father rarely went anywhere other than the neighborhood grocery or the temple. "I saw this watch," his father continued, his voice softer now. "It reminded me of the one you wanted when you were 13. Remember that?" Sundar did remember. It was a digital watch with a stopwatch. He had stared at it through the cracked glass of the shop window every day on his way home from school. But they couldn't afford it then. His father had made a promise one day, and Sundar had believed him. I walked into the store. His father said, thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd finally buy something from a place like that. There was a long silence. The ceiling. The hand ticked in slow circles. "They didn't speak to me," his father said quietly. "Not once. They looked at my shirt, my sandals, and turned away. One of them whispered something and laughed. I stood there for 10 minutes. Not one person asked if I needed help." Sundar felt his throat tighten. He looked at his father's hands, still resting on the table, still stained from years of holding tools and wires. Those hands had built a life for him. Those hands had given him everything. I walked out without saying anything, his father added. But on the bus ride home, I felt small. Like I didn't belong in a world like that. Sundar didn't speak. He couldn't. There was a strange rage burning inside him, not the kind that exploded, but the kind that simmered and curled around your ribs. His father had never asked for much. He was a man of pride, not ego. He had taught Sundar the value of simplicity, of dignity. And to think that someone had looked at him, really looked, and decided he wasn't worth their time. Later that evening, Sundar walked alone through the same streets he'd grown up on. The power lines still drooped like vines overhead. Children still played cricket with broken bats and plastic bottles. He thought of all the times his father had come home with grease on his shirt, his forehead sweaty, but his smile wide. Every sacrifice, every long shift, every dream quietly stored away so Sundar could have a better life. None of that had been seen by the man at the store. The next morning, Sundar made a call. He didn't call the store. He called his assistant. "In California. I need the name of the store manager," he said. "And the regional director. And the head of customer experience for the whole chain." There was a pause on the other end. "Is something wrong, sir?" Sundar's voice was calm. "I want to have a conversation with him, personally." What he didn't say was that this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the watch. It was about something much deeper, something older than success. It was about respect. But just as he began planning that meeting, something unexpected happened. Something that would change the direction of everything. His father disappeared. No phone call. No. One had seen him since dawn, and Sundar had no idea why. Asterisk the missing. Silence that morning air carried an uneasy stillness. Sunlight touched every wall of the apartment, but the warmth had vanished. Sundar stood barefoot in the middle of the living room, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. His father's shoes were gone. His phone was on the nightstand, untouched. The teacup from the day before still sat beside the sink, dry and forgotten. He had already called the neighbors, the temple, the local clinic, even the old friend who ran a small electronics repair shop near the station. No one had seen Ragunatha Pichai. Every minute that passed felt heavier than the last. Sundar, who could calmly present at the world's largest tech conferences, who could make decisions affecting billions of people, now found his hands trembling. He wasn't afraid in the way one fears failure or bad press. This was something else, something deeper. It was the fear of losing the one person whose quiet strength had shaped his world. He remembered something, a small detail. Last night, just before dinner, his father had taken out an old envelope from the drawer. Sundar hadn't asked about it then. But now, every missed opportunity to ask a question felt like a wound. He rushed to the drawer. The envelope was gone. In its place was a note that it wasn't long. It wasn't even dramatic. It was written in the back of an old electricity bill, going on a journey. I need to see something for myself. Don't worry. Appa. The handwriting was firm, but the message only raised more questions. Sundar sat down slowly, the note clutched in his hand. A journey at his age, alone, and for what? He opened the wardrobe looking for clues. Inside, among neatly folded white shirts and well-worn lungis, he found a photo album he hadn't seen in years. Inside were fading photos of family trips, birthdays, Sundar's graduation. But tucked near the back was something odd and old. Grainy picture of a large white building, unfamiliar, not in Chennai. On the back, his father had scribbled 3 words, Coimbatore, April 1978. That name unlocked something. Sundar remembered stories told long ago, back when he was still in school. His father had once lived in Coimbatore, working at a small factory before he met Sundar's mother. There had been a man, his boss, who had promised him a promotion. Promised that one day he'd be something more than a technician, but the promotion never came. And his father never spoke of that place again. Was that where he had gone? Was this about the store? Or something older? Something that had stayed buried in his father's heart for decades? Sundar knew he had no choice. He packed a bag quickly. No assistance, no private jet. Just a train ticket and a heart full of questions. As the train pulled out of Chennai Central Station, he stared out the window, the scenery blurring past, light. Old memories rising too fast to hold on to. The train rocked gently as it moved south. He thought of his father, boarding a similar train decades ago, alone, unknown, hopeful, and now, maybe haunted. As the journey stretched into hours, Sundar let himself remember things he had tucked away behind deadlines and conference rooms. The way his father used to check the fuse box every night before bed. The quiet pride in his eyes the day Sundar first flew to America. The small ways he had shown love, never through grand gestures, but in making sure the fan worked during hot nights, in waking early to shine his son's school shoes, in sitting silently at the table while Sundar talked about dreams he barely understood. He arrived in Coimbatore just after dark. The station buzzed with life, but Sundar felt strangely disconnected from it all. He wasn't here as a tech CEO. No cameras. No introductions. Just a son trying to find his father. He started with the photo. He showed it to taxi drivers, old shopkeepers, anyone who might remember. Most shook their heads. Some stared at him, half recognizing the face from newspapers or television. But one man, a tea vendor with cloudy eyes, looked closely and said, "That's the old KGS mill building. It's shut down now, but it's still there, near the river." Sundar thanked him and set off. The road to the old mill was narrow and overgrown. Wild plants pushed through the cracks in the concrete. The air smelled of dust and distant rain. When he finally reached the gate, it was chained but broken. The building itself stood like a ghost tall, quiet, and worn by time. He stepped inside. It was dark, save for light filtering in through shattered windows. Bits of paper and rusted tools littered the floor. He walked slowly, carefully. Each step echoed like a memory. Then he heard something. A cough? Faint. Coming from the far end. He ran toward it. In the corner. Leaning against the wall was his father. Alive. But exhausted. Sundar dropped to his knees. "Appa," he whispered. His father looked up, smiled faintly. "I didn't think you'd find me so quickly." Sundar hugged him tightly. It was the kind of hug he hadn't given in years. The kind that says everything words cannot. Asterisk after a long moment, his father spoke again. "I had to see it." "Heh. Sad?" I needed to come back here. To remember who I was before everything? Why? Sundar asked, his voice cracking. His father looked around at the ruins. Because before they ignored me in that store, someone ignored me here. Someone who said I wasn't good enough to move up. I believed them for years, but after that day in the mall, I realized I had never truly let go of that pain. I thought maybe if I came back, I could understand something, or forgive something, maybe even forgive myself. Sundar didn't speak. His father didn't need answers now. He needed presence. So Sundar sat beside him, and for the first time in a long time, there were simply two people, not a tech giant and his aging father. Just two men caught in the quiet echo of the past. Asterisk. But just as they stood up to leave, Sundar's phone rang. It was his assistant. Double quotes, sir. I think you need to see this. The store. The one your father went to. It's gone viral. Someone recorded the whole thing. It's everywhere. Sundar's heart dropped. What was once private was now public. And the world was watching. Asterisk, the world that watched a train back to Chennai move slower than before. Maybe it was the weight of everything they carried now. Sundar sat beside his father, but neither spoke much. Outside, the world moved in blur's green fields, broken tracks, empty stations. Inside, the silence between them was no longer heavy with confusion. It was filled with understanding. But the phone call still rang in Sundar's ears. It was supposed to be just a quiet story between a father and son. A small wound felt deeply. A moment of disrespect that echoed far into the past. But now it was everywhere. Someone had taken a video. Someone had watched Ragunatha Pichai being ignored in that luxury store. Watched him stand patiently, looking at watches he would never wear, while the salesman turned away. And now the whole world had seen it. When they reached home, the street outside was crowded. Neighbors, reporters, curious passers-by. Someone had recognized Sundar's father from the video and posted it online. The clip had spread in minutes. A quiet man in a simple white shirt standing in a place that was designed to make him feel small. The internet was on fire. How could they ignore a man like him? One comment read, "They didn't even know he was Sundar Pichai's father," another said. But even if he were nobody, he deserved better. As they entered the house, Sundar's phone buzzed again. Messages poured in. Executives, journalists, friends, strangers. But one message stood out. It was from the global CEO of the luxury store chain. Deepest apologies. Would appreciate a chance to speak with your father personally. Sundar stared at the message. There was something bitter about it. They wanted to apologize now, only because people were watching. It wasn't about respect. It was about reputation. He showed the message to his father. Ragunatha read it slowly, then set the phone down. "I don't want a meeting," he said quietly. "Not like this." "Why not?" Sundar asked. "They should see who you are. They should know." His father looked out the window. "I don't need them to know who I am. I just needed to remember who I was, and I did that." Those words settled like dust across the room, but the world wasn't finished. The news channels ran the clip on repeat. "Father of Google CEO humiliated in upscale store," the headline read. Opinion pieces followed. Some praised the elder Pichai's dignity. Others criticized the culture of elitism. The store chain released a public statement full of carefully chosen words, promising internal review and staff training. But to Sundar, it all felt hollow. That night, he couldn't sleep. He walked through the narrow hallway of their home, past old family photos and faded calendars. He paused at the photo of his graduation from Stanford. His father had worn the same white shirt, then the same worn sandals, the same quiet pride in his eyes. No one had looked at him twice that day either. He had blended into the background. Even as his son was celebrated, Sundar sat down at the table where his father always drank his morning tea. The same table he had done his homework on. The same table where, as a boy, he once cried after failing a math test. His father had said nothing then, just sat beside him, offering a gentle hand on his back. That's how he had always taught him, not with loud speeches or punishment, but by showing up quietly. Every day. And now the world was finally seeing that quiet strength. But through the wrong lens, they were making his father a symbol. A lesson, a story. But he wasn't a symbol. Next morning, Sundar made a decision. He called a local filmmaker, someone he trusted, someone who understood stories. I want to film something, he said. Not a documentary, just a conversation. My father and I, no lights, no music, just us. The filmmaker agreed. A week later, they sat in their small living room, 2 chairs facing each other. A single camera. No script. The filmmaker asked one question. What do you remember most about your life? His father looked thoughtful. The day Sundar was born, he said. I remember holding him for the first time and thinking, I have no idea how to do this. I have no money. I have no big house, but I will give him everything I can. Even if it's just honesty. There was a pause. And what do you think now? The filmmaker asked. His father smiled. I think he turned out all right. Sundar couldn't help but laugh softly. Did you feel hurt in that store? The filmmaker asked gently. I did, his father admitted, but not because they didn't know who I was. I felt hurt because they forgot how to see people. They saw clothes, shoes, wallets, not eyes, not hearts. The video was uploaded quietly. No hashtags. No promotion. But it spread. Millions watched. They didn't see a tech CEO. They didn't see a scandal. They saw something real. A man, humble and quiet, speaking of pain and pride. A son sitting across from him, full of gratitude and guilt and love. One comment read, this isn't just about a store. This is about how we treat people when we think no one's watching. Another said, my father worked in a garage all his life. This reminded me of him. I wish I had told him how much he mattered. But not all reactions were kind. Some accused Sundar of using the moment for attention. Others mocked his father's appearance. Said things like, why would a billionaire's father dress like a beggar? Sundar read those words late into the night. His fists clenched. He wanted to reply, to fight back. But his father stopped him. Let them say what they want, he said. My clothes don't define me. And your silence will say more than their shouting ever could. That night, as the city lights flickered outside and the sounds of the street faded, Sundar finally understood something his father had known all along. You don't chase respect, you carry it. And sometimes, when the world isn't watching, that's when it matters most. But just as things began to calm down, another twist arrived. A young man knocked on their door. He wore a suit too large for his frame and held a nervous smile. Sir, he said, looking at Ragunatha. I think you might be my father. The air left the room, and the past, once buried, came rushing back. Asterisk, the door that never closed, knock still echoed in Sundar's ears. Long after the young man had stepped inside, the room once filled with quiet memories and morning sunlight, now felt small and airless. The young man stood at the edge of the doorway, his hand shaking just slightly, his eyes bouncing between Sundar and his father, like he wasn't sure where. To rest them, he couldn't have been more than 24, maybe 25. He wore a cheap black suit, the kind bought in a rush for interviews or weddings. His shoes were scuffed, his tie uneven. There was nothing remarkable about his appearance, and yet his presence changed everything. What did you say? Sundar asked quietly. The young man swallowed. I think your father is my father too. The silence that followed felt like a rope pulled tight between two lives that had never met. Ragunatha Pichai didn't speak. He didn't even look surprised. He looked tired. His hands, folded in his lap, didn't move. The fan above creaked softly, spinning above a moment that felt far too still. Come sit, Sundar finally said. The young man stepped in, hesitant. He sat on the edge of the chair like he might have to run at any second. What's your name? Sundar asked. Avinash, the young man said. Avinash Mohan. His father didn't flinch at the name. Instead, he looked straight into Avinash's eyes and said, Mohan was your mother's surname, wasn't it? Avinash nodded. And in that simple gesture, a truth unfolded. You knew, Sundar said, looking at his father now. His voice was calm, but there was something sharper beneath it. You knew him? I did, his father said. And Ragunatha looked down. His voice came slowly, like it had to fight through years of silence. Before I married your mother, there was someone else. A woman named Kavitha. We worked in the same factory in Coimbatore. I loved her, but her family didn't accept me. They moved her away. We never spoke again. He paused. A few years later, I heard she had a son. But by then, I had a new life. I had you, and I told myself it was too late to go back. Sundar sat back in his chair. The house suddenly felt unfamiliar, like a childhood memory retold by a stranger. Avinus cleared his throat. I'm either. She never told me who my father was. Not really. She just said he was a good man. Quiet. Someone who built machines. She passed away last year. After she died, I found an old letter. Unsigned, but it had your name in it, in a photo. I followed every clue until I saw your video. Then I knew. There was no anger in Avinash's voice. Only longing. And something else, hope. Why come now? Sundar asked gently. Avinus looked at him. Because even though I never knew him, I still wanted to meet him. Not for money. Not for apology. Just to understand where I came from. His words fell into the room like rain. Ragu and a TA finally looked up. You have her eyes, he said, just like I remember. Avinash blinked fast. He nodded once, like that was the only thing he'd needed to hear. Sundar stood up and walked to the kitchen, needing space. He poured himself water, but his hand shook. He'd spent his entire life idolizing his father, believing him to be a man of discipline, of integrity, of simple truths. And now, that image had a crack in it. Asterisk. He wasn't angry, not yet, but confused. Heartbroken, maybe. Not because of what had been hidden, but because of what had been lost. Why didn't you ever tell me? Sundar asked when he returned. His father looked at him. Because I was afraid. Afraid you'd see me differently. Afraid I had already failed one son and I couldn't risk failing another. Sundar sat down. But now you have a chance to make it right. Ragunatha looked at Avinash again. I don't know how. Avinash gave a small smile. Just be there, that's enough. For the next hour, they talked. Slowly, awkwardly at first. Avinash shared small pieces of his life, his job at a local startup, his love for fixing old radios, the way he always wondered why he was so drawn to machines when no one else in his family cared about them. I think I got that from you. He said. His father smiled. Maybe you did. By the time Avinash stood to leave, something had shifted. Not fully healed. Not finished, but opened. Like a wound that had finally been allowed to breathe. Will you come back? Sundar asked him. If I'm welcome, Avinash said. You are, his father said. You always were. After he left, Sundar and his father sat in silence again. This time, it was a silence filled with honesty. You're still my hero, Sundar said softly. But now I see you fully. Not perfect. Not simple. Just human. His father looked at him with teary eyes. Thank you. For the next few days, the media storm began to quiet. The story about the store was fading, but the conversation it sparked was still growing. News outlets shifted focus from outrage to reflection. People were talking about respect again, about the power of humility, and more importantly, about the invisible stories carried by ordinary people. But then something unexpected happened again. Letter arrived. Handwritten, not from the very salesman who had ignored Ragunatha in the store. It said, I was wrong. Not because you turned out to be someone important, but because I forgot how to treat people. You reminded me of who I used to be. Before this job hardened me. I'm sorry. I'm leaving this line of work. I want to do something that matters. His father read it in silence. Do you believe him? Sundar asked. His father looked up, eyes kind. I believe he wants to change. And sometimes that's enough. But the story wasn't over yet. A week later, Sundar received an invitation, not to another meeting. Not to another apology. But to a private event. The same luxury brand. Only this time. It wasn't about watches. It was about something his father had never expected. And what waited there would test everything he thought he knew about pride, forgiveness, and the true weight of a name. Asterisk. The invitation envelope was thick, embossed with gold along the edges. It didn't belong on Sundar's modest dining table, surrounded by newspapers, spectacles, and half-finished cups of filter coffee. It had weight, not just physical, but emotional, symbolic. It was an invitation, and it came from the top. The luxury brand had planned a private event in Chennai. Not a public apology, not a press stunt. Something more curated, more strategic. Sundar had read it twice. His expression, unreadable. We would be honored. The letter said to have Mr. Ragunatha Pichai attend a special evening in recognition of humility, dignity, and character. Sundar placed the letter in front of his father. It's a trap, Ragunatha said, barely glancing at it. Maybe, Sundar replied. Or maybe it's an opportunity. His father leaned back in his chair. To do what? Shake hands with people who never saw me until the internet. Told them to. Sundar understood. Truly. He didn't want his father paraded around like a symbol of forgiveness, as if being disrespected and then applauded was some noble arc. The world loved stories of redemption, but often ignored the wounds beneath them. You don't have to go, Sundar said softly. But if you do, go for you, not for them. His father looked at the letter again, then at his son. And if I go, what do they want from me? Sundar didn't have the answer. Because sometimes even he, with all his experience in boardrooms and negotiation tables, couldn't tell the difference between sincerity and strategy. For the next 2 days, Ragunatha said nothing about the invitation. He went on with his routine watering the tulsi plant, rewinding old cassette tapes, polishing a flashlight that hadn't worked in years. And Sundar let him be. Because some decisions needed to grow slowly in silence. On the third morning, just before sunrise, Ragunatha emerged from his room already dressed. White shirt, neatly pressed dhoti. A watch on his wrist, simple, analog, scratched on the edges. I'm ready, he said. Let's go. They didn't speak on the drive. The car moved through quiet city streets, past temples bathed in early light and closed shutters still dreaming of yesterday. When they reached the venue, a tall, modern glass building, glowing. In gold, they paused outside. It was beautiful, and cold. A valet opened the door. A hostess welcomed them with a nervous smile. No cameras. No flashing lights. Just whispers, glances, curiosity wrapped in politeness. Inside. The space was decorated like a high-end gallery. Watches encased in glass. Champagne glasses held delicately by servers in white gloves. But at the center of the room stood something unexpected. Chair. Not gold. Not velvet. Just a simple wooden chair, like one you'd find in a home. Next to it was a small plaque. The chair of dignity, it read. A symbol of the man who reminded us to see people, not price tags. Ragunatha stared at it for a long time. A senior executive approached. She was in her 50s, elegant but not overdone. She bowed her head slightly. Sir, she said, we failed you, not just in service, but in principle. We wanted to say thank you, not for who your son is, but for who you are. Would you allow us to name this space after you? We want to create a permanent corner in every store. A place where any guest, no matter how they're dressed, can sit, be offered water, be respected. It will be called the Pichai Corner. The room fell silent. Everyone waited, but Ragunatha didn't respond. He walked slowly toward the chair and sat. He didn't smile, didn't pose. He just sat. And then he spoke. Do you know what it means to be invisible? He asked. To walk into a room and feel it shrink around you. I have lived many years. I have been poor and I have been proud. But the worst feeling is when you're made to believe you are less. People listened. Even the glasses stopped clinking. I don't need a chair, he continued. I don't need a corner. I need people to look up, to meet eyes, to see past shoes and shirts. If you want to honor me, then do that. Don't build spaces. Build habits. He stood up. And if you still want to put my name on something, make sure it doesn't collect dust in a corner. Make sure someone feels welcome in it, not just today, but when no one is watching. Then he walked away. He didn't wait for applause, and none came, because the silence was more powerful. Outside. In the quiet of the parking lot, Sundar caught up with him. You didn't let them finish, he said. I did, his father replied. They just didn't expect me to say no without a speech. They laughed together, softly, like they used to when Sundar was a child and broke something in the house but owned up to it. That night, back home, the chair moment went viral. Someone had recorded it quietly, not planned, not staged, just raw. And people responded. But the most surprising thing was what came next. A letter arrived, handwritten again, but this time from a woman. Dear Mr. Pichai, it began. I'm Kavitha's sister. We never met, but I watched your son's video. And then I watched your moment in that store. I wanted you to know before Kavitha died, she spoke of you often, not with bitterness, with love. She said you were the only man who ever treated her like she mattered. She never stopped believing you were a good man, and I see now. She was right. His father read it alone, and when he emerged from his room, he didn't say a word, but Sundar noticed his eyes were. Read. Not from pain. But from something gentler. Something like peace. But even as one door closed gently, another opened with a storm. 1 day later, a well-known politician made a statement on live television. Why do we celebrate the pain of the poor only when their sons become rich? What about the millions of fathers like Mr. Pichai who are still invisible? And suddenly the story wasn't just personal. It was political. And the spotlight that once offered healing now threatened to tear open wounds all over again. Asterisk, the name that echoes the speech played across every news channel in the country. Social media caught it in bold captions and fiery hashtags. Some called it truth. Others called it provocation. But the words hung heavy over everything Sundar had tried to protect. Why do we only see a poor man's dignity when his son becomes powerful? It was a question that cut straight through the polished surface of what had happened. For days, Sundar and his father had received messages filled with praise, empathy, and admiration. But now, the tide was shifting. People weren't just talking about respect. They were talking about the imbalance between visibility and justice, between those who were seen and those who never would be. Sundar sat at the dining table again, the same spot he had occupied through every chapter of this story. His father was quiet across from him, sipping tea, like always. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Inside, the silence between them was different now. Not heavy, not cold. Just full of thought. Asterisk. Do you think they're right? Sundar finally asked. His father didn't look up. Some of them are.